We are live from River Valley Room at City Hall. Just confirming that we're good to begin. Excellent. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the September 29th, 2022 Code of Conduct Subcommittee meeting. It is 1:30 p.m. and I will call the meeting to order. At this time, I would like to acknowledge that we meet on the traditional land of Treaty 6 territory and acknowledge the diverse Indigenous peoples whose ancestors' footsteps have marked this territory for centuries, such as Cree, Dene, Saulteaux, Blackfoot, Nakota Sioux, as well as Métis and Inuit, and now settlers from around the world. We will begin today's meeting with a roll call of committee members. Councillor Knack.
Good afternoon.
Councillor Salvador.
Good afternoon.
Councillor Rutherford.
Good afternoon.
And Councillor Rice.
Good afternoon.
I would also like to acknowledge that we are joined by a few other councillors. Councillor Jans.
Hello.
Councillor Tang.
Hello.
And that would be all of the councillors. At this point, I will now call for nominations for the chair of the Code of Conduct Subcommittee meeting. Do any committee members wish to put forth a nomination for chair?
Yes.
Sure, I can. Oh, go ahead.
I would like to nominate Councillor Salvador.
Excellent. Councillor Salvador, do you accept the nomination?
Yes, I do.
Are there any other nominations? Seeing none, I declare nominations closed. At this point, can I get a motion to appoint Councillor Salvador as chair of the Code of Conduct Subcommittee?
So moved.
Thank you, Councillor Rutherford. We will set up the vote with eScribe, and just in a moment, please vote.
I'm yes.
And I don't have eScribe with me, so I'll be voting verbally. I'm a yes as well.
Thank you, Councillor Knack. Thank you, Councillor Rice. We have all the votes. And that is carried. The motion that was carried was Councillor Salvador has been elected chair. I will now transfer the chair to Councillor Salvador to conduct the election for vice chair.
Well, thank you. And take any calls for election of vice chair.
Sorry, since I can't raise my hand, I'll raise it now via audio.
Go ahead, Councillor Knack.
Thank you. I'll nominate Councillor Rutherford. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. So we have a nomination on the floor for Councillor Rutherford. Would someone like to move that?
So moved.
Thank you, Councillor Rice. And we'll get the vote queued up. And I just want to confirm, Councillor Rutherford, do you accept?
Yes.
Excellent, thank you. So we'll get that vote ready to go and call the vote.
And I'll vote verbally yes.
Thank you, Councillor Knack. We're just waiting on one vote. We have all the votes.
Please display the vote. That is carried. Excellent. And now we will move on to the adoption of the agenda. Would someone like to move adoption of the agenda for today?
So moved?
Thank you, Councillor Knack. And just to clarify, that is with the addition of 6.1, Council Code of Conduct, Lessons Learned.
Absolutely.
Excellent. So please call the vote.
I'm a yes.
Thank you, Councillor Knack.
So it's not show up on the screen. I'm yes.
And please display the vote. That is carried.
Thank you.
Excellent. We'll move on to approval of the minutes. Can I get a motion for approval of the minutes, please?
Point of order.
Yes, Councillor Rutherford?
Do we have minutes? This is our first.
Oh, excellent point. There are none. Thank you so much.
Sorry.
So approval of minutes, there are none, as this is our first meeting. And protocol items, none that I was made aware of. Okay, so we will move on to selection of items for debate. I'll look for names on the board, or I know Councillor Knack, it might be difficult for you to buzz in, so just let us know if you would like to select anything. Councillor Rutherford, go ahead.
I will select both items 6.1 and 7.1, please.
Excellent, thank you so much. Voting reports not selected for debate. We selected everything. Requests to speak, there are none. And requests for time specific on the agenda, none. Moving to reports to be dealt with for another meeting, none. Request to reschedule reports, also none. And unfinished business, none, because this is our first meeting. So we'll move on to public reports, to 6.1, Council Code of Conduct Lessons Learned. And I believe we have a presentation ready to go.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So good afternoon. My name is Aileen Giesbrecht. I'm the City Clerk, and with me today is Michelle Plouffe, the City Solicitor, Cam Ashmore, and Nancy Jacobson, both from Legal Services. The report before you is in response to a motion that was made in 2021. We were asked to go away in consultation with the Ethics Advisor and Integrity Commissioner, both who are here with us today. We were asked to come back with some recommendations on how that process could be improved. Those are contained within Attachment 2. We also want to provide for your reference a council-approved process for sanction hearings that was approved in January of 2020. One of the recommendations that we're presenting to you today is that we would like to incorporate that process actually into your bylaw so that there's only one place people have to go to find all of the information relevant to the Code of Conduct and, if required, a sanction hearing process. And with that, we're happy to answer any questions. But before we go over there, I just want to see if Legal Services has any introductory remarks.
Yes, thank you, Aileen. Cam Ashmore here. Councillors, I just have a few introductory remarks. And I'm going to sort of summarize the report in very short detail here, because this is a little bit confusing at times as to the interaction between the various offices that are involved in the entire Code of Conduct process. So you have 3 members of Legal Services here today, and that's partly because each of us has different roles at different times in the Code of Conduct process. You also have Ms. Pytel, your Integrity Commissioner, here today. Legal Services does not in any way give any type of advice to Ms. Pytel. She actually has independent counsel. What Legal Services really does is it provides advice on drafting of the bylaw itself, the procedures behind the Code of Conduct, and other various things. Although we work with Ms. Pytel if necessary on those aspects, we don't actually provide direct advice to Ms. Pytel. Ms. Pytel obviously is involved in the actual investigation and recommendation currently on what the sanction is. You also have Mr. Rathgeber, and Mr. Rathgeber is the ethics advisor, and it's the same thing. Legal Services does not provide advice to Mr. Rathgeber. He actually has a rather unique dual role. He provides ethics advice to counsel or counselors individually. He can also take on, currently under his contract, a legal role in the investigation process. So if a complaint is brought against a counselor, he can actually act as a lawyer for that particular counselor in the investigation process. So you have a number of different offices here. What we were asked to do is come back with some lessons learned, and what this first written report is really, it's broken down into three things, two of which are going to be covered off by a bylaw amendment. The first thing is we need to insert procedures for the sanction hearing into the bylaw. That's simply for transparency purposes. Those procedures effectively already exist. The second is there's a complication with when and how we make the Integrity Commissioner's reports, once they come out, public when they should be public. And that's a FOIP issue, but it's also a timing issue because City Council is really the one initially that was supposed to be able to do that, but you would publish your agenda before that. So that would be solved with a bylaw amendment as well. The third item that's talked about in the report does not have a recommendation, and that is talking about changing the way the sanction hearing process would end up working. Not the investigation process, the sanction hearing process. And part of the reason for that was because of the complications that we've had over the past number of years with the actual sanction hearing process. And city councilors, because they are not used to that process, it ends up being a little bit more confusing and complicated. So one of the things we discussed amongst ourselves is providing City Council with other options if they want to take those other options. But again, no recommendation. And I want to be very clear on one thing. Ms. Bytel and Ms. Rathgeber have seen those options. They were not the ones initially involved in coming up with those options. So this is in no way Ms. Bytel asking for more authority in order to do more. It's simply an option that Legal Services came up with if City Council wants to go down any of those paths. So with that, we're happy to take any questions.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for those introductory remarks and explanation. I'll look to the board and colleagues if there are any questions. Councillor Rutherford, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. So just to clarify, the recommendation as it's laid out in the report is just for the bylaw amendments. It wouldn't change any of our current processes. It would be the status quo processes. Is my understanding correct?
That's correct, Councillor.
Okay. I'll move the recommendation then in that report. I know I did select this. I don't know if others have questions, but I was just not clear on that. So that's why I selected it. So happy to move the recommendation. I think, yeah. And then I don't really have any introductory remarks except that, you know, when I read all the other options, I think there's pros and cons with all of the options, and I'm not sure that the amount of work required for some of the other options would necessarily get us to a better position. And so I think at this time, staying with what we currently have as a process is ideal. But I look to my colleagues for any other thoughts on that.
Well, thank you, Councillor Rutherford. So we have a recommendation now on the floor. I'll just wait if any other colleagues have questions. I know I have a few. So Councillor Rice, you're motioning. You can't quite get logged in to put your name on.
No, the request is agree. I cannot.
Sure. What you can just go ahead. Go ahead.
I cannot request. Okay, thank you. Just a very quick question. I think the reports and provide very detailed information and also very clear description and between the legal services role, city council's role, and then also commissioner's roles as well. My quick question is about what's the really difference and between the status quo and then for the recommendation of option 4? What's the real difference between that?
So the main difference between those, Councillor, the status quo ends up having the Integrity Commissioner do their investigation, and if a code of conduct breach is found, they provide a recommended sanction. But that's just a recommendation. So the status quo, it is completely up to City Council itself as to what the sanction should end up being. Under option 4, what ends up happening is that instead of a recommended sanction coming from the Integrity Commissioner, they will actually determine the sanction. And I say they, Ms. Pytel currently. If the impacted councillor, the councillor that's been found to be in breach, is not happy with that sanction, then there could be a right of appeal to City Council or a council subcommittee if you decided to go down that path. And the effect of that is essentially still having some oversight over the Integrity Commissioner's sanction decision, not the code of conduct breach decision, but the sanction decision. So if City Council had an appeal brought to it and disagreed with the Integrity Commissioner's sanction decision, they could override it and implement their own sanction decision, either lesser or greater, depending on the circumstances. But that would only come if the impacted councillor brought an appeal. So if the impacted councillor was found to be in breach, the Integrity Commissioner said, here's your sanction, and the impacted councillor says, I'm fine with that, there would not be an appeal. So it really comes down to a question of whether the impacted sanction or the impacted councillor decided themselves on whether to appeal the Integrity Commissioner's sanction decision.
So from that perspective, and then what could be difference and from city clerk's office, and I understand we talk about in the report, we talk about the city clerk office, we talk about the city council's rules, we talk about legal services. Is there any, how to use that words? I try to find the legal words. I'm not familiar with legal words. Is more easier for effective from time perspective and from process perspective?
So it could be, Councillor, and I'll give you the example of the recent code of conduct decision that you ended up happening. The impacted councillor there likely would not have appealed, therefore it would never have gotten to City Council in the first place. So it simply would have taken one step out of the process in that particular scenario.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, the answer provided.
Great, thank you, Councillor Rice. I'm actually just going to follow up on that line of thought as well, just with some further questions about option 4. So and this is getting into some details, but let's assume that a councillor does appeal. At the appeal hearing before council or potentially committee of council, what threshold would be required to overturn a sanction then? Because right now, as the process is, we're basically having to reach the bar of a supermajority in order to sanction. Because that just really changes the dynamic and changes the role of council. So I'm trying to understand what that would look like.
So it would really be up to council at that point as to whether or not they wanted to maintain the supermajority standard, whether they wanted to change it to a majority standard. But it's kind of a two-step process at that point. If there's an appeal, then the next step would likely be what in legal terms we call a de novo hearing on just the sanction. And what that means is you can read what the Integrity Commissioner said for a sanction, but you don't have to follow it. You're deciding yourselves what the sanction should end up being. So you don't have to agree or disagree with the Integrity Commissioner. City Council at that point decides for themselves. But then you have to go, the second step is the motion process in order to adopt the next sanction. So to give you an example, if the Integrity Commissioner found a very serious sanction and the councillor appealed and nothing could be done at City Council, you have a supermajority and nothing, well then likely what would end up happening is no sanction. But it would depend on how the bylaw would be worded at that point.
Right, okay, so just, if I'm understanding correctly, if it was appealed, then it would almost revert to the existing process we have now. It wouldn't necessarily be framed as overturning. It would be starting from basically, you see the recommendation that's been made by the Integrity Commissioner, and it's the same process as current, right?
Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it, Councillor.
Okay, okay, that's helpful. Yeah, and I appreciate Councillor Rice's comments around, are there sort of efficiencies here, and I appreciate the example you provided as well, because I think that's an instance where, yeah, the time that we spent elevating that up to council didn't really change the outcome. Okay, that is great. I will go to Councillor Wright. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, so our status quo right now, how does this compare to other municipalities, like or other levels of government for their elected officials?
So there's a number of different systems across Canada on this. Sometimes the Integrity Commissioner decides a sanction. Sometimes it goes to a City Council. I'm not aware of any that would follow option 4 right now, but there's nothing wrong with doing option 4. It makes a lot of sense. Ms. Pytel may actually be aware of something, and I'm not on that. But I think the vast majority of the ones in Alberta, it would go to the City Council as a whole to determine the sanction. That's actually a problem that happened in Rocky View County with a case that went to the Court of Queen's Bench at that time, King's Bench now, where the courts overturned a decision because of various problems with the hearing process in Rocky View County.
And, sorry, it had to go to the courts because sort of what format or what option were they?
So they were deciding, Rocky View County had decided on a sanction in private. The impacted councillor was not happy with that, not happy with the entire process, took that to court in order to overturn the entire process and was successful in doing so.
Okay, but, okay, I guess, sorry, more clarity, but that was sort of using the option 1 or the option 4?
So I'm not aware of whether or not, I'm just going off memory now, Councillor. I believe that they had an independent investigation, which was part of the problem. They don't have an Integrity Commissioner in Rocky View County. So it's not really our option 1 either. But part of the problem was who they hired for that independent investigation as well. That was part of the issue. So it was a very complicated scenario there.
And I guess, could it go to that extreme in either of these options? The councillor would have the legal right to go to court for it?
Yeah, absolutely, Councillor. So the next step past this, after a sanction decision is made, if the impacted councillor was not happy, they could take that to judicial review in a courtroom. And that's part of the reason why it's important to have a fair process at that level. And that was really the problem in Rocky View County. I think the best way I would say it is they're not set up the same way as we are. They're set up in a lesser fashion, a more ad hoc fashion, partly because they're a smaller municipality. I think they may have improved their situation now because of them going through the court process. But any municipal decision that ultimately can have a significant impact on somebody can go to court.
Okay, so none of the options is better over one to avert something like that happening?
That's actually a complicated question.
I'm trying to find a simple answer.
Yeah,
okay.
The simple answer to that is if you create an appeal process, it acts as sort of a funnel, and less go up to court if you go through another level of appeal process. But it has the impact of having another level of appeal. So you have the complication of that. But it eliminates, or at least in theory, it eliminates things going to court with an appeal process, because usually the appeal body will work out any problems with the lower body.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. I see Councillor Paquette on the board. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. So just a process question. I'm looking at this this motion and looking at the report. I'm kind of unclear about what the recommended amendments are. Oh, to the bylaw. Okay, yeah. So when it comes to, is it okay for me to make comments, speak about this motion this time? Is that okay?
You're speaking to Councillor Paquette?
Yeah.
I think we have a few more folks on the board. So why don't I come back to you for speaking to?
Okay. Yeah. Maybe I'll skip that. I'll just ask then. So council has gone through a number of these now so far, and there's never been a sanction. For one, because it wasn't recommended, and for three, because council couldn't reach a supermajority. And I'm just wondering, when it comes to the code of conduct, I mean, council couldn't reach a supermajority, and there's lots of factors around that happen to be maybe less about the issue and more about interpersonal stuff. And so, how do we get around that in an actual bylaw?
So I think the answer to that, Councillor, is sort of built into the various options that have been provided. So part of the reason why you may want to give additional powers to the Integrity Commissioner is to take that role out of Council's hands to get rid of that personal bias. The other option is to create a subcommittee, which is commented on in the options as well, and preferably that subcommittee would act more like a CSLAC or an SDAB, where it's not members of council sitting on it, it's independent, probably for efficiency, members of SDAB that already exist. But that way it's not the councillors making the decision. You take out the councillors' personal biases or thoughts on the sanction process.
So if I could just give a simple answer, Councillor Paquette, because this has come up previously, council, not this council, but council was the one that set the bar at a supermajority. Council can also direct us to bring amendments forward to change it from a super to a simple majority.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I think, yeah, I mean, if I recall, the reason for the supermajority was so that, ironically, so that we could avoid bias. So it would actually take like people who might be biased to also say like, yeah, no, this was a clear case, but that never actually materialized. So yeah, no, it's a little bit odd because in every scenario there is that risk of just the human factor coming in rather than just the evidence factor, and perhaps there's no way to get rid of that. I don't know. Are there mechanisms to get rid of that?
So it's like I said, Councillor, that the mechanisms, that there's always going to be a human factor because humans are making the decision in one sense. But the reason you have an integrity commissioner is to attempt to remove that bias, to make it an independent process. If you went down the subcommittee route, the reason you would have a subcommittee is to take councillors off the decision-making process and hopefully make it as independent as possible. So instead of people that have a vested interest in making a decision, it would be an independent body that has no vested interest. That's probably the best you can do.
Yeah. Okay. So, and that's option 4 then would be that it's still transparent. There's still an opportunity for appeal, and it's still, in the end, if there is an appeal, there's still, I guess, the public representatives making the final decision, and so that leads to fairness.
Correct, Councillor. Or you can go with option 2, which gives the power entirely to the Integrity Commissioner, and you leave that in the hands of a court if somebody wants to take that decision to a courtroom. So there you have 2 different options with 2 different consequences associated with it, but both of which I think would accomplish what you're talking about.
Yeah, and So the problem with that is that then the oversight becomes a judicial oversight
Correct.
on, yeah, and so no clear answers here. Just options better than each other. Somewhat. Okay, I get it. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Paquette. Councillor Rutherford?
Yeah, yes, thank you. I appreciate this discussion so far. I still am hesitant with option 4, and I think when you play out these scenarios, you have to go with a worst case scenario. And I think and I'm asking this of legal or integrity, but does option 4 give more potential for political posturing? And what I say by that is, let's say the integrity commissioner just makes a determination of a sanction, and that counselor doesn't appeal it. But then court of public opinion is that's not hard enough. Could counselors not then be like, yeah, well, we agree. If we had it in our hands, we would have made it harder. But it's out of our hands. It was the integrity commissioner's choice. And then it becomes a political thing in terms of kind of throwing, in a sense, the integrity commissioner under the bus and taking out accountability. I'm asking that scenario, like, what is my understanding of that? Is that a potential that could play out in scenario 4?
Yeah, I think you're right, Councillor. In both scenario 4 or in any of the scenarios where it's a subcommittee, that could play out the same way that in theory can play out today under the SDAB. And that's partly why these are options to be discussed. A lot of this comes down to what does City Council as a whole want its role to be in these processes. And if it wants to maintain the oversight to eliminate that possibility, but take the risks of exactly what's happened in the past already with our sanction process, that's fair. But you're absolutely right.
Okay, and so I want to lean into this because I do see it's the same as I've talked to many of my council colleagues around. Consensus is really a dangerous space because you give somebody a veto power, and I do think that the supermajority is potentially what's caused a little bit of challenge because you don't really need. Yeah, so I wanted to lean into what if we did not do supermajority. So what if we had the status quo and the motion as it's on the floor, but with an amendment to the bylaw around the supermajority to a regular majority? Any unintended consequences that you can think of? Because clearly what I'm hearing from counselors that have experienced this before and what I saw is you're right. There comes interpersonal, there becomes, a small minority of people that are gonna, yeah. Whereas most of our decisions making at council are majority, right? And we trust that majority to say it, but at the same time, then we're still all accountable for how we voted and for that public to see how we voted on that decision. Thoughts?
So I think you're right, Councillor. It really comes down to a question of, so the whole idea of a supermajority is to make sure the vast majority of council is happy with the actual sanction that's going to be put forward. That was the reason I think it was out there in the first place. So the consequences, they're not really unintended consequences, it's just the obvious consequences. It's easier to sanction with a simple majority. So if that's what council wants, that would be the way to go.
But it's also, in the flip side of that, it's harder to sanction with a supermajority.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's some interesting food for thought. I'll listen. I see some other people on the board, so I'd be curious their thoughts. And I'd really like to hear from maybe a few councillors that have experienced, were around when this original motion that put this forward in 2021. And so I'm guessing from some of the sanctions in 2021, sanction hearings, their thoughts on majority versus supermajority. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rutherford. I'll go to Councillor Jantz.
Yeah, just to speak to in support of recommendation 1.
Okay, no questions, Councillor Jansen?
Nope.
Okay. Okay, I have a few more, I guess just process questions first. So we have a recommendation on the floor that is essentially sort of a procedural cleanup, if you will, to add some more clarity and transparency to the current bylaw. If there was a desire to go with simple versus supermajority, would that be included as part of this motion, or would we be looking for a separate one?
I would like that to be added separately, and then I would suggest that we go up to Council Services Committee and get that validated before we do the work.
Excellent. Okay, well, thank you for that clarity. Yeah, so I will now go to, I don't see anyone else on the board for questions. So if there is interest in speaking to this, I'll now look to the board. I see Councillor Knack is notifying me that he would like to speak to this, although he cannot put his name on the board at this moment. So Councillor Knack, you can go ahead.
Thank you, and you can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. Yeah, so I didn't have questions because, to you, Madam Chair, you asked the question about whether if we were going to consider option 4 or option anything like that, if that would be subsequent to this, and it does sound like that's the right way to do it procedurally. Because, so this part of the motion, to me, is pretty straightforward. I've been very much debating whether we should need a change, and so I think in terms of good process, I probably shouldn't speak to the hypothetical subsequent, but I will say this is that I'd at least like us to debate the notion of option 4. So I think I will, upon completion of this particular motion, make that subsequent, at least for discussion, because I have some things I think I want to talk about. To Councillor Rutherford's point, I'd love to share, but I can't do that during the question period unless I ask a don't you think question, which isn't really a good process. So I'll support this. This to me is just a cleanup of making sure our process is aligned and has it in the bylaw, and then I'll make a subsequent following this. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Councillor Knack. Councillor Jans to speak.
Yeah, I mean, as somebody who has only a passing experience with the this whole subject matter, and acknowledging that I am quite new, I'm in support of the first option of the status quo, just to continue, I think, figuring this out. I think that in general, I support in general the bare minimum in terms of code of conduct structures and requirements. I think that we it's up to the electorate who they elect. We have to respect that. We have divergent views, and there's a number of different reasons why we want to minimize the encumbers on democratic participation, no matter how unsavory or unpleasant we may feel it is at times. I think that we just need to keep riding out this process together, that ultimately it is a very political process. And as we're new and as we're learning through this, I'd be reticent to make any sorts of changes. I mean, the moving someone off of a committee, taking sanction against someone, this whole process, I mean, these are very, very severe. And I think it's really important that ultimately in democracy, it's up to the voters. And that's where I would continue to ultimately put the most weight, and seeing a process that could see colleagues having to weigh in on one another and take a it's rife with not just problems politically in terms of representative democracy, but also in terms of relationships in the hallway. One of the reasons I was so quick to apologize after my tweet incident was I wanted to try and minimize any of the impact that whole situation would have on any other counselor. That I didn't want anyone to have to weigh in or comment or participate in any way in that. I wanted to save council's time and move forward. And I think that's sort of the lens that we should be taking in many of these cases, that any particular counselor's issue that we're not talking about financial malfeasance or other major actual problems here, that a lot of this should be left between the the counselor and their constituents, and to take that feedback and to adjust their conduct accordingly, and to apologize or take responsibility accordingly. So I think that we have seen that these processes have been incredibly political, and I think it notes in the report that they can be weaponized as such. I know in the past that we've had some other counselors and others who have had much different opinions on this. So I think it's a very new structure, and I would support leaving it as is and continuing to move forward. I think the reason the supermajority is there is because something that is so egregious that it requires the weight of council to weigh in on it. It should have a subsequently high threshold as well too. I'd be very reticent to see anything that limits anyone else's participation. And I think about other bodies I've been a part of, the elected and non-elected, where the sanction process was also equally high for this reason, that we want to elect or we want to respect the electorate and the representatives' ability to evolve here. So I hope that helps answer councillors' questions, who I think it was Councillor Rutherford who had asked about reflections on the experience. But hey, we can always come back to this in a year if it's if we see need, and we can adjust it accordingly. So thank you, everyone, and again want to express gratitude to administration for their reflections here.
Thank you, Councillor Jans. I'm just going to quickly seek clarity from the clerk, because yes, this is a procedural cleanup, but it's also referencing attachment 1 in the actual motion, and I'm also hearing a desire that there might be a subsequent, and I'm just a little concerned that might actually be contradicting what is in the current motion.
Yeah, so the motion on the floor right now is that we bring back the status quo, which is outlined in attachment 1. I would request respectfully that committee give us clear direction on coming back with amendments, either the status quo, which is in attachment 1 with some housekeeping amendments, or if you do want us to look at option 4, then we need to go back and bring that option back. I don't know why we would bring back 2.
Yeah, thank you for that. So just need to be clear with members of committee that if there is a desire to see anything other than status quo, that we would need to make that clear at this point, as opposed to going through a subsequent. And I'm getting notification from Councillor Knack that he would like to potentially do that. So I'm going to go to Councillor Knack.
Sure, sorry, and thank you, Councillor Salvador. Sorry, I misunderstood the process. I thought we would do that after. My apologies. So I think I'd like to at least put that as an amendment that instead of option 1, maybe we use the option 4 with the appeal going to City Council. I think that was 4A actually, if I remember.
Okay, so thank you for putting that forward, Councillor Knack. So for clarity, you would be striking attachment 1 and saying attachment 2, option 4?
So the way I understood it, and maybe the clerk can correct me if I'm wrong, is that there's still changes listed in option 1, or sorry, attachment 1 that need to be put into this. So that procedural change still needs to stay. This would just be amending the specific part of who is issuing the sanction. Okay, well, I understand your intent. We're just getting some things clarified over on administration side, so just give us 1 second.
Just so that we're all on the same page, and so right now what's on the floor was us to just bring back housekeeping amendments. What I'm hearing from one councillor is that rather than sticking with the current process, which is everything just comes straight to council, which is the current process already approved in attachment 1, which will remain the process until such time as it's changed. It's messy because there's still a motion that's been made by council. We need to clean that up. which we can work with law to figure that out. What we're trying to figure out right now is what amendments do you want us to bring to the bylaw? So whether it's option 1, 2, 3, 4, or 4A, if you can just tell us what you want, we'll figure out with legal services how to craft it properly.
Certainly, I believe it was 4A is the Integrity Commissioner will issue the sanction, and then council would be the appeal body, if I'm correct.
Councillor Knack, your connection's not great. Could you please repeat that?
Sorry, I think it's option 4A, but essentially what I'm looking for is option 4 or 4A, which should be the Integrity Commissioner delivers the sanction, and then council serves as the appeal body.
That's option 4, not 4A, is my understanding.
4, sorry, thank you. Yes, the option 4 is for
Okay, so Councillor Knack, that's 4. So option 4, can we get the amended wording then for the from the clerk?
We'll just need one moment to prepare that.
Thank you.
Point of order.
Yes, Councillor Rutherford?
It's not amended wording. It's an amendment. It's a second motion amendment, right? I wouldn't consider this friendly.
So
yes, it would be an amendment.
it would be an amendment. And
but we're just going to vote on the amendment then.
That's,
it's not changing this
That's
motion.
correct. That's correct. Yes, so there would be an amendment on the floor. We would vote on the amendment.
Okay.
And we're just waiting for the wording for the
amendment. Just to confirm, regardless, we still need a process. We just want to figure out what amendments you want us to bring back. If Councillor Knack wants to put the amendment to the main motion on the floor, it's not friendly and it's for option 4. Is that correct, Councillor Knack?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. The clerk's just going to put it up on the screen. One moment, please. I'm just going to put it in the chat while we're loading it into the system.
Thank you. Okay, so we now have an amendment on the floor from Councillor Knack that attachment 1 be deleted and replaced with attachment 2, option 4. So I'd look to the board for anyone who would like to speak to the amendment.
Sure.
Councillor Paquette, please go ahead.
Yeah, this is
Sorry,
great.
can I introduce that?
Oh, apologies. Yes, please. Councillor Knack, go ahead.
Sorry. Just a bit of context as to why I put it forward. Because this is Councillor Rutherford's point a bit earlier. I couldn't really speak to it until it was on the floor. I feel okay with both, being quite honest. So whether we were doing option 1, the status quo, or going to option 4, I'm not excessively passionate about option 4, but the reason I think it's at least worth a debate and a discussion, and I'd love to hear other perspectives on this, is to some of the earlier questions. No matter which process we use, it'll be politicized. There's no doubt in my mind. The previous process was politicized in a couple of examples, and a new process would be politicized. That will happen in any scenario. Why I think this is at least worth debating is I think about some of the other processes we have for things like the ward boundary review or council compensation and how that recommendation, while still ultimately approved by council, which is why I think the council appeal is the right process in this, the recommendation comes from an independent body, and that has helped, I have found, depoliticize some pretty contentious items. So take council compensation, which I believe has now been independently determined for the last 16 years. Over my time on council, what I have found is that anytime there is an adjustment to council wages, while you'll get a handful of emails from people who may express concern about, say, an increase as an example, when you share how that process is dealt with and how it is done by an independent body, that in almost every situation has alleviated those concerns. So I think there has been value in that. Similarly to the ward boundary review, I think while even in this last one, there were still a few questions, a few in the ward I represent and the boundary with Councillor Hamilton and one of the communities there. And I think there was one on the north side where there was a bit of conversation. But overall, I think most people felt good about that process because it was done independently. So again, I'm not going to lose sleep if we go with option 4 or option 1, if I'm being perfectly honest. But I think we should at least have the opportunity to debate this. So that's why I wanted to put that on the floor and then be able to actually speak to this as per the request from Councillor Rutherford a bit early. So I'll leave it there for the introduction and very interested in others' feedback on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Knack. And I'll just look to see if anyone has any questions. So committee members, Councillor Rice, are you questions or to speak?
Speak.
Councillor Rutherford, do you have questions or to speak?
I have a question to the mover.
Go ahead.
Okay, yes, to the mover, I guess my question would be with option 4. What problem are you trying to solve that currently exists that would be solved with this option?
Thanks. I think using the sanction hearings from last term, those were politicized quite heavily as, or made to suggest that council was, at least my interpretation, I'll speak just for myself, I believe they were being viewed and communicated to the public as council trying to silence a member of council's free speech, which I don't believe was a fair representation or accurate in any way, but it was a very common message used, and I did see some public feedback that would suggest that there was some agreement to that. So I think this might help address that. I don't think it would eliminate it, but that may help address that in a more meaningful way.
Interesting. So you're trying to, so if I'm understanding your answer, the problem is politicization of the sanction decision, and which one will depoliticize that the most?
Yes, I think that's how I would view option 4 as a better opportunity to depoliticize it. I don't think it will eliminate it, and again, I think there's a case to be made that option 1 is still potentially the best, but wanted us to have this discussion.
Okay, I will just speak to it based on those answers. Thank you.
Councillor Wright, do you have questions or to speak?
Just one quick question on option number 4. It talks about a slight increase to costs. Is that within existing budget, or will there be an unfunded service package coming forward?
We don't have that worked out yet. The first step is for us to get direction from this committee, and then we have to take that forward. Right now, all of the costs for the sanctions hearings are absorbed.
Okay.
If you add an extra step, we'd have to look into that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. And Councillor Paquette, you were on to speak as well, right?
Yes.
Okay, please go ahead.
Oh, thank you. So I largely, maybe 100% actually, agree with Councillor Knack, having been through the process. It's a very different thing when council is deliberating a recommendation on a decision that was made from an independent body than it is to ask council to levy a suggested quote unquote punishment. It's a very different thing. And as Councillor Knack said, the cry was that council itself was trying to silence another council member instead of the truth, which was that this went through a process and our integrity commissioner issued a judgment that they then recommended to council. So if we can remove the part where it's council who makes the final decision on whether or not that judgment should stand is fair, I think removes a lot of the well, shall I say it, uselessness of the process. But if there's an appeal and then council deliberates on that appeal, it's a very different conversation and probably a better conversation. And so I really would urge this committee to consider option 4 for those reasons, all the ones that Councillor Knack stated as well. It's I can tell you from firsthand experience, it's intensely uncomfortable to be in that position. And by the way, the proposed sanction was to write a letter of apology. That was it. And to have to go through that entire circus over such a simple thing, if we want to talk about dollars, the amount of money spent on administrative and council debate time, I don't even want to add that up. And in addition to all the time that councillors have to spend individually answering a ton of angry emails from people who thought councillors were trying to silence a colleague. So let's just remove that whole dog and pony show from the process and go with option 4. That would be my recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Paquette. Councillor Rice to speak.
Thank you. So, as a new councillor, and then I think I'm still under the process, really try to get fully, thoroughly understanding and for this process, what's impact could be. Yeah, so I really respect my colleagues, returning councillors. They have lots of experience and in the past, because for this new council, we only had one time to go through that process. Just by looking at the steps and then between the status quo and then option 4, I don't know right now we have enough experience as a new council to make meaningful change. And because each council has different council members and face a different situation. So I would like to say maybe like at this moment, maybe just to keep the status quo at this point. But if my colleagues would like to go to option 4, I'm still okay as well. But I think give them more time for us to reflect what happened or to know what happening. And then that time gave us and also give to administration some time to sort everything out. To me, I think that could be better option at this moment. Of course, I will say if my colleagues want to go to the option 4, I'm okay for that as well.
Thank you, Councillor Rice. Councillor Rutherford to speak.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Salvador. I am not as agnostic as the mover on this one. I am very concerned about, as was mentioned by Councillor Rice, trying to solve a problem and creating more problems in the midst. I don't think it's a fair analogy to compare with the independent bodies of the wages or the ward boundaries, because ultimately those are recommendations that come to council and council makes the decision. That is actually the status quo process that we currently have. The integrity commissioner makes a recommendation and we as council decide whether to do that sanction or not. I think that what happens with the potential option 4 is, as I highlighted, you get a scapegoat. Councillors get a scapegoat, and that is the integrity commissioner. When you look back at the incidences that happened in 2021, how many people that that voted in that sanction hearing are still on council that supported that individual and didn't choose to do the letter? I agree 100% with what Councillor Jans is saying. This is something that is absolutely not going to be depoliticized, because how we act in these chairs and how we conduct ourselves is saturated in politics and court of public opinion. And I think as part of that court of public opinion, people want to know how we as council are going to hold our colleagues to account or not. And then come next election cycle, I think that reflects in how people vote to some extent. And so I do worry about removing that from a public accountability perspective from me in saying where I stand on things, but also in terms of creating a scapegoat and potential to undermine the integrity commissioner's assessment. We're also putting a lot of power into the hands of whomever that sanction is against. So if I'm a counselor that has a sanction recommended by the integrity commissioner and I don't appeal it, then it doesn't go further. But what if council's like, well, actually then there's a whole bunch of council colleagues that say, actually, we don't think that's harsh enough. Right? No matter either of these scenarios, it's not ideal. But we have to always go back to what was the root of why we have sanctions in the first place and a code of conduct. Why did this province want every council to have those? And how do we want to show up and hold each other and ourselves accountable for our behaviors? And so I really struggle with option 4. I get it. I get that you're going to get publicly criticized if maybe silencing somebody or not freedom of speech. But I think in this role, we step into that space. We get criticized on decisions we make all the time. And I don't think that this decision is any different. So I will not be supporting this amendment to option 4. I always respect the majority of my council colleagues and respect wherever this vote falls. But I think we're creating more work, more money, and I don't think it's going to solve the problem that we're trying to solve. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cartmell.
Thank you. Sorry for arriving late. My time hasn't started there. So first of all, I just in listening to some of the comments just here, interesting that we're talking about the politicization of the process. I was present for all 3 of those sanction hearings. I voted against sanctions twice, and I was just characterized as a supporter of the individual. That's not at all the truth, and I've shared with some of you an anecdote just recently about that adds clarity to just why that is not true. So if we're going to talk about politicization, we've got to watch our language in this chamber, first of all. I'm drawing upon my experience working with APEGA, with the Professional Engineers Association. I was the Director of Investigations there for 2 years, and I was a member of the Discipline Committee for 10. And the history of that organization is that there was at one time a discipline committee that investigated and made findings on their investigation, and then made findings on the findings in terms of sanctions. And then if there was an appeal, the same body heard the appeal. And there was an apprehension of bias in that situation and in that construct. So those items were disaggregated. An investigation committee was struck, and a subset of about 20, and a subset of that in panels of 3 would do investigations. And the findings of that investigation, upon an accusation of wrongdoing, would be forwarded to the discipline committee to assign a different panel to determine whether, based on the investigation, a hearing was required or sanctions ought to be imposed. And after that hearing, sanctions were imposed or not with that second panel. If the member was found guilty and wanted to appeal, that appeal went to yet another panel, an appeal board, which had a 3-person tribunal assigned. So you had separation of investigation from findings and sanction from appeal. Not necessarily because there was a bias, but because there was an apprehension of bias. To consolidate all of this process, not even in one body or one committee, but in one person, creates, in my mind, a monumental apprehension of potential bias. Whether it exists or not, whether it's found to exist or not, the apprehension is there. Further to that, in the engineering process I just described, you were judged by a jury of your peers. If you were found to have not designed something properly, then a bunch of design engineers looked at what you did and figured whether you found something wanting or not. This is a different realm. It doesn't come with education requirements or experience requirements or working under the care of. But when you do things in this role, you make certain decisions about what database you use or how you react to people or in what forum you speak. And unless you sit in these roles, you really don't fully understand what it's like to be an elected official in the public eye 26 hours a day, making those decisions. So to stand back there and say, you did wrong, you should have done this, you should have done that, is kind of unfair if you haven't actually gone through it. Now, I don't know how we solve that. I don't know how, when some situation is brought to a level of complaint, how we get to a jury of peers, because that actually takes it the other way, and I don't think there's any desire to do that. Maybe there's retired elected officials or people from another jurisdiction or something like that. I don't know. I don't know how to solve that. But I will say that during those sanction hearings last term, I thought about what I would have done or what I would not have done, and would that have been reasonable in the circumstances? If I mistakenly sent emails to 4 addresses, now, maybe I could have been better in how I apologize for that, but if I made that mistake, does that rise to a level of a sanction? Meh. If I've gone down the hallway and tried to intimidate one of your staff members, different. And unless you're here, and unless you're in these seats, I don't know how you, maybe some of those judgments are different, but I don't know how you actually can say, I stand here in judgment of you, I've investigated, I've determined finding, and I'm going to determine the sanction. I just do not see how that can be consolidated, and I would not ever support consolidating that in one body or in one person. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cartmel. So before I go to Councillor Knack to close, I'll just offer a few thoughts as well. So, yeah, I really appreciate Councillor Knack putting this on the floor. You know, initially from, I'll say more from an efficiency perspective, I was interested in option 4. I think it does have the potential to eliminate the need for certain sanctions to go up to council, or recommended sanctions rather. At the same time, you know, I am hearing a lot of cautions being raised from colleagues, as well as some of the risks that have been outlined by folks like Councillor Rutherford. I think that's very valid. And at the end of the day, there are challenges with any of the options that are in front of us. And I just come back to, you know, this is our code. It is council's code, and we are a duly elected body, and I do think that onus is on us to hold one another accountable. I do agree with Councillor Cartmel that there is danger and risk in sort of concentrating too much authority outside of council as a body. So hearing others' comments, really taking that into consideration, I won't be supporting this amendment at this time, but really appreciate the conversation today, and I'll go to Councillor Knack to close.
Thanks. Thanks, Councillor Salvador. So I think I'll save us a step in the process and just withdraw the motion. I was really interested in the discussion. I would be interested in Councillor Cartmell's suggestion at some point, but that's probably not a now conversation. So I'll withdraw and save ourselves some time.
All right, thank you, Councillor Knack. And I guess just process for withdrawal, that's at the discretion of committee.
To withdraw a motion, it's based on informal unanimous consent or a majority vote if that's
So
not
I'll just
achieved.
look to colleagues. Yep, and it looks like we're good to withdraw. So that would take us back to, if we can get the initial wording. Perfect. Okay, so thank you for that conversation, everyone. I would look to the board if there's anyone to speak to the motion as stated. Not seeing anyone on the board. I will just, to the clerk, does this need to give direction to go to Council Services Committee as well, to recommend to Council Services Committee?
That was the question we had for you, councillors, if this should be going back to the Council Services Committee.
I think that would be most appropriate, yes. And that would be when?
Next week.
Okay, great, yeah. No, I think that makes sense. Okay, and I'm not seeing anyone else on the board. So we are ready to vote. We can call the vote. Excellent.
I'm a yes.
We have all the votes.
Please display the vote. That is carried. Okay, moving along to 7.1, which is in private. Can I get a motion to move in private, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Councillor Knack, and that is pursuant to Section 24, Advice from Officials of the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy That is carried. And I'll just give a few seconds here to move back into public. Thank you.
Great, we are back in public.
Great, thank you. So we're now back in public, and I believe I see Councillor Rice on the board. Please go ahead.
Thank you. And I would like to move the September 29, 2022 Office of City Manager verbal report, OCC 01481, and be received for information. That's first. Second, I would like to move that September 29, 2022 Office of the City Manager verbal report, OCC 01481, remain private pursuant to Section 24, advice from officials of the Freedom of Information of Protection of Privacy Act. Number 3, and I would like to move the mayor and councillors review the Code of Conduct bylaw 18483 and the September 29, 2022 verbal presentation from the Integrity Commissioner and Ethics Advisor and submit comments, questions by December 31st, 2022, and that the city clerk consolidate the questions feedback to the next Code of Conduct subcommittee meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Rice. Any questions, comments? Okay, and not seeing anyone, just giving a second or two. Great, anything to close, Councillor Rice?
I would like to take this opportunity to thank you, City Administration, thank you, our Integrity Commissioner and Ethics Advisor, and also our legal services provided this really comprehensive presentation and for City Council to review our Code of Conduct. And so looking forward and for all my colleagues and bring back the comments and the feedback and for next meeting. And thank you.
Excellent. With that, I will call the vote.
I'm a yes.
Thank you, Councillor Knack. Waiting on one vote. We have all the votes.
Please display the vote. That is carried. All right. Good work, everyone. Looking at motions pending, none. Notices of motion and motions without customary notice, none. And we are adjourned. Thank you so much, everyone.